everyone. Welcome back to another Tech Talk session with me, Tripta Sinha, your host from Tech Jobs Fair. And today we are joined by a very special guest, Mr. Ricardo Brito. Ricardo is not just work and life coach, he is someone who stands by your side as you navigate your professional development, aiming in discovering your new paths and opportunities while fostering a healthier relationship with work. So let's welcome Ricardo here. Hi, Ricardo. How are you doing today?
Hi, Triti. I'm good, thank you. Thank you so much for having me here today. I hope I can deliver the value of storytelling today to get a job. Thank you so much for the invitation. How are you?
The pleasure is all ours. I'm doing very well. Thank you so much, and thanks a lot for joining us today. Yes, but like before we dive into the topic, which is going to be very interesting, it's about how storytelling can supercharge your job seeking, right? So before we dive into the topic and discuss more about it, we would like to take a second and want you to tell us your journey, your story so far, and yeah, we'd love to hear more about you and your journey, Ricardo.
Yeah, so I will try to make it brief. It's a bit all over the place, but I'm from Portugal. I was born and raised in the only place where you can ski and snowboard in Portugal, so it's not only a surf country. I study fine arts like sculpture, painting, cinema, and all of that. But actually, my first career was around graphic design and branding, interior design. In Portugal, we do a lot of things at the same time. It was a cultural shock when I moved to Germany in that regard. And then when I moved to Germany, after coming from that old school world, I realized that that industry was not for me anymore, and I needed something new and more reliable and sustainable. That's when I became an intern again after many years in the market, and I learned UX from scratch by myself through working in companies, and my career grew for the next 12 years. I built design teams, I led innovation projects, I worked with different types of companies, startups to big corporations, and then I had a burnout. And during this burnout, I was really like, I'm tired of tech. I don't know what to do next. And by accident, I actually discovered coaching. I cooked meatballs from home because I thought I wanted to have a restaurant. I tried a couple of things while I was burned out, trying to understand what I wanted to do next. And then I ended up studying coaching. And for the last 2 years and a half, I did what I told myself that I would never do, is having my own business. And I'm doing it, and I'm loving it. That's my brief story.
And that was the plan, I guess, the universe plan. Like, you had to do something on your own and help others to discover themselves.
Exactly. That's what I'm passionate about.
That's lovely. That's wonderful. And to all our viewers, like if you have any questions that pops in your head along when we get through the conversation, please feel free to drop your comments and your questions on the comment section, and we will look into it and we'll try to answer it as we go along or while wrapping up the session. Yeah. Great. So, this is something very interesting that we're going to talk about storytelling about job seeking. Like, this is not something would just think of, in a general situation. They wouldn't think of storytelling, how they can, how storytelling can help in looking for jobs. So, my first question would be like, how can someone like storytell and how can that help them find a job?
So let's start with the last one. How can that help finding a job, right?
Yeah.
Uh, we humans, we are wired for stories more than we are wired for facts. So the
Mhm.
act of going to interviews and position ourselves out there, we are telling stories. We are telling stories about ourselves to convince others that we are good enough, that we are motivated enough, that we love the work. So we are all constantly telling stories. But when we look at how people are approaching interviews and how approaching, seeking a job, is very
Yeah.
much of, hey, this is my references, this is what I did, hire me. And facts are cool and needed, to be fair, especially nowadays, but storytelling, this is what makes people connect. So the way you present yourself, the way you show your value, the way you make sense of yourself and explain to others has a huge impact in how you come across in an interview, how you come across as a professional. And often we are not very intentional about how we craft these stories and how we position ourselves, right? So And this can increase so much the chance of getting the job, of getting where you want, but also, more importantly, also make sense of who you are as a professional for yourself in the first place.
Mhm. So, when we say storytelling, do we exactly? So, what comes in my head would be like narrating, right? Like what you've done and what you want to achieve, or something like that in an interview. So, let's say, do they actually talk about the resume they've already given to the organization or the hiring manager, or do they talk about the life experiences they've had, or what are the things that they should usually talk about that would, like enhance their personality and the chance of getting the job?
Yeah. So I think there are two ways that people go wrong, and I've been there too, right? About telling their story. One is either you have such a fantastic stories and vast experiences that you try to compress that into a single story, that you need to leave a lot of stuff outside and it's a bit of a Frankenstein kind of a story, and then it's one single story to tell a multitude of experiences, to tell to a multitude of audiences. It's a long shot. That's why people don't understand your value, because you are not communicating what people want to hear at each point in a
Mhm.
cohesive way. And the other side of things, how people go wrong about this, is about just spitting facts and going experience one, experience two, experience, this is what I did, this is what I did, this is what I'm good at, this is the skills. It's just facts. After the third one, people are already off and thinking about what they want to have for dinner. So one of the first steps is like, who are you talking to? What's the story that you want to tell? So if you're talking to a recruiter, to a hiring manager, to your colleagues, to HR, each story or each version of the same story needs to be different, needs to be tailored to what they want to hear and the value that you bring to the table. So
Mhm.
it's important to have a mix between of what have you done in the past, but also why were you valuable for it. A lot of people describe skills and things they did and they use, but they don't understand, or they don't talk about, look, we were facing this problem, or I was facing this problem, or the team, and I solved it by doing this because I brought this value to the table, and this is the impact that it had. Yes, I used all of those skills, but skills is a purpose. Like, you don't hear a carpenter telling you how to use a hammer, how he used, look how much I used my hammer to fix your door. No, you want to know how did he fix your door, not how did
Yeah,
he use the hammer. So it's a bit like that, also changing and is creating this balance of elements.
right. Yeah. I mean, skills are something you have it, but then how you utilize the skills is like what's important, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Because you inherit it, like you have the skills, but knowing the perfect use of it in the perfect situation is what matters.
Yeah, and there is also this idea of your previous experiences. For example, I've worked with people who have very different experiences in the past, that sometimes they are breaking into new industries or trying
Yeah.
to pivot somehow, and they don't know how to use the previous experience, right?
Right.
Sometimes they're even ashamed. They don't even want to talk about it, which is a pity. And
Yeah.
sometimes they do it very loosely. So I'll give you two examples. Is that okay if I to make it more
Yeah, sure,
practical?
definitely. We'd love
I
to
was
hear about
for
it.
There is one person that I was working with. She was a product designer, but she was also a fantastic data
Mhm.
scientist, data engineer, pardon me, and also a product manager. She was advanced in her career, so she had this vast experience. But the way she was putting herself out there was not very um, was very all over the place in this sense. Because, for example, saying that, hey, I'm a product designer with some data engineering experience doesn't get you further. But if you say, look, I'm a product designer, but I'm actually data driven because I understand the data, I understand how to collect it, I understand how to process it, and this is how I apply it in my product design process, and this is how I use my previous experience to bring value to my new experience that is valuable to your company. So
Mhm.
uniting these. Another example: somebody that moved from cooking to design, they have completely not connected, right? But they are, because if you are in a kitchen, there are processes. You need to think about food prep. There is phases of production, research, prepping, sequencing. Sounds like design. So
Yeah.
once you go back, like, oh wait, but this is a skill that I actually have and I can use it somewhere else, even as far apart as cooking and design. This is
Yeah.
how the things come together.
That's a really unusual relation, but then yeah, it makes sense because it has all the phases like pre-production, production, planning, and then presentation as well after you finish cooking, right? When you're serving it to someone,
Exactly.
so you're presenting. Nice. That's unusual but nice. Something I've heard for the first time. So yeah. Now let's talk about, let's say they have story to tell, they have experience that they, frame it in a story, but what are the struggles they usually face in telling their career story, and what can they do about it, like to make it better or improve it, the job seekers
Yeah.
basically.
I think the challenges depends. It's very personal, right? I think a lot of it comes to self-esteem, for example, and self-trust. A
Yeah,
lot of it also comes from bad experiences at work and being a bit traumatized, to be fair. Um, Lack of how to structure a story. And to be fair, there's too much noise on how to put yourself out there and so on. Probably I'm also part of that noise, but that makes people confusing. So there are two ways that people fail, right? Which is either creating one single story or creating um, just spitting out facts. So what I do with people, and one of the best things that you can start doing is start doing a career retrospective. It probably doesn't make too much sense if you are very early in your career, although it's always good to start that. But
Mhm.
start by doing a career retrospective. So I go, for example, with my clients and the tools that I have available, you go by each and every experience one by one and you map out what did you do, where did you do it, how did it help, what was the impact, which stories can you tell. And one of the funny things that I encourage people to do, and people get very surprised about it of the results, is think about all the other roles that you had in that job that was not part of your title. And when people start digging into this, they start to say, oh, wait a second, but I was also a product manager and a crisis management. And I was doing all kinds of things that was not in my role. Right. So when you start dissecting this, and I will not lie to you, it's painful exercise, it's very tedious because you need to really map out everything. But in the end, you really understand the spectrum of things that you did. And this is one of those things that people have a challenge with. You sit in front of your CV, you try to, okay, let's make a nice sense of this, and you don't recall many things. So a lot of things just you just forget. So by doing this exercise, you really need to dig deep into your mind and to retrieve all of those things that you did. And a lot of people, you remind yourself, if you start thinking about things that you did, more and more will come up. And this slowly builds self-confidence. This slowly builds a bit of more, wow, I did all of this, including the bad projects. If you have a bad project, many people say, oh, I don't want to talk about that project. It was terrible. My boss was really toxic. The company was chaos. Yeah, but you did great work. Just separate your emotional baggage and talk about it because it's a great story to tell. So
Yeah.
the struggles depends, right? So I didn't reply exactly to your question because the struggles is very personal, but the way to get to the solutions, it's a lot of it is looking inwards and mapping everything out, for example, as a start.
Right. So, yeah, of course, the small things matter. Like, you must have done things that outside your job responsibilities and your job profile and all of that. So, is it good to plan this, like how you want to, talk about it, and maybe also practice? Because what happens is, like, when they go to an interview, sometimes they have their resume in their head or in front of them, and when they talk, they just try and twist the words, but then use the same, things mentioned on the resume. So is it better to, like, look for it, dig deeper what they have done in the past, and then plan for it and also practice it before, like, maybe they show up in an interview? Does that also help?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. And for example, I was working with somebody recently who was into fashion design, um, graphic design, and art direction, right? And they had like components that were more technical and components that were more creative. At
Yeah.
the end of the day, we created three different positionings, right? One for fashion, one for graphic, and one for art direction. But even within the fashion and the graphic, but especially in the fashion, there was a subset of those positionings because some were more technical jobs and the other ones were more creative jobs. So we defined each and every story. And now are you going to present the same project in 5 different ways or four different ways at this point, right? So this allows, like if I'm talking to an art director, I'm going to talk about this project from this art direction perspective. If I'm talking about like, pattern making to a tech, to somebody that is hiring me to be a more technical fashion type of person, I will talk from the same project from that angle. So knowing these stories and knowing the value that you brought in each and every of those segments of the project gives you the tools that you need to go to an interview and really nail it, because you are not yeah, on this project more this more that. No, you are straight to the point, and the more you practice, the more you have these stories, which, to be honest, it's a summary. It's sometimes we get to the point it's just 3 lines per story, because once you have these 3 lines, your brain automatically knows what to tell.
Yeah.
So yeah, totally encourage the people to do those stories and to prep for interviews.
Right, right, right. So it's like knowing what to pick from where and where it fits, like, fixing a puzzle kind of a thing.
Exactly, I call it
So,
the Lego system, right? Because in the end, that's what it is. Sorry.
yeah. No, I was saying the pieces are everything involved in your experiences. You just have to pick the right one and put it in the right place.
Exactly. Yeah.
Great. So, let's talk about few ways which can help, like better show their values to employers or the positions, um, while like storytelling. Which ways can we, like, better show to like our values to employers and all of that?
Having a stronger sense of self, for starters, knowing who you are, starts right there, right? Because you don't want to go and just show the facts and just show the selling points. You also needs to be honest, needs to come from inside, right? So knowing who you are. For example, I do this exercise where we do this superhero exercise, which people design their own superhero based on their own skills, based on their own experiences, and so on, and that gives them a round view of who they are
Yeah.
professionally. And it's like, oh, I'm kind of the facilitator that helps unlock these problems, or more the creative type that can dive deeper and present solutions. And that starts with the character, right? Because a good story starts with the character. And then what does that character bring? What's the value that it brings? What are the evidence that you brought this? And this is how you show to employers, and how you show to your bosses and so on. Like, this is who I am. This is what I bring to the table. These are my superpowers. This is evidence of what I did. And hopefully they will understand the value. But the thing about the value is you need to show the value differently to depending who you're talking to. Because maybe for your teammates it's important to show that you are with them and you are a good team player and that you can collaborate. But for your boss, it might mean that yes, you are that, but they are looking for, can you solve me this specific problem as a
Yeah.
professional in this company, because this is missing. Where is your value, right? For And if you're talking more, let's say, to more business people, for example, if you are a designer, they don't care about your pixel pushing, they don't care about your team collaboration, they care, what can design do for my business and what can you do
Yeah.
in that context. So it's these different layers, right, that one needs to adapt the story and show the value. So in the end is know who you are, what superpowers do you have, where's the evidence for this, and figure out which value is the person that you are talking to looking from you.
Mhm. Yeah, sometimes what happens, like, when you are, let's say, looking for a role change, maybe upskilling or, upgrading your career. So I've seen a lot of companies have, for same position, they do have a lot of different role that comes out. Like, for example, if, let's say for marketing, an example, maybe the company A they're working in right now, and then they want to switch to company B in the same role, like the designation is same, let's say associate to executive, right? So, but the roles differ. Like maybe there's something they haven't done in the past, but still, like, they have the title of, the designation that gets promoted to the one the company B is looking for. So does that really count or help? Like having the same designation is more important, or having the same job roles done in the past makes more difference?
That's a tough question because I don't know how politically incorrect I can be. I think there's a problem in the market regarding titles and roles. Let's be honest. I think in
Yes.
the tech
Yeah.
world,
It's a
It's
lot.
wild. It's a jungle. So it's like anything that is like roles and titles. To be honest, I don't really care which title you had. And
Hmm.
because you can be the VP of something of a team of one, and you can be the team lead of a team of 50. So who
Yeah.
cares? Title wise, I think it should be irrelevant. I was a hiring manager, and that was always something like I don't care about your title. I care about what you bring to the table.
Right.
If your experience can prove that, and if you can communicate that to me in the right way, and then I can assess within this organization where I could put you and where you could enter. I think the titles is a very misleading discussion that we have in tech, and I think that's one of the problems we are seeing in hiring is that not this is a bit of a hot take here is that people rise so fast into the ranks in tech so young at a certain point that I guess we are missing experienced hiring managers that can actually understand the value of the candidates in front of them besides the
Mhm.
title, besides that, but understanding what is the potential of the person in front of them. So yes, I think I'm more towards the experience, how you show your value, and what you actually did, rather than whatever free label they gave to you.
Right, because like what you do matters the most, right? In what position you do it doesn't really matter, but the roles and responsibilities that you look after, that you cater, makes more difference.
Yeah.
Because this is actually really confusing. It pops up a lot, like sometimes, they say that, hey, I have a relevant skill for this, but it seems that the company is hiring for this particular designation. So it doesn't really match the designation for them. And then sometimes they end up not applying for the job, thinking, maybe I'm not the one they're looking for. However, they think like, some of the roles and responsibilities match. So I think
Yeah.
they can have like a different approach in that and still apply for jobs if they think the roles and responsibilities they've had in the past matches the new one.
Totally, but I think it also needs to have some sort of open mindedness from from the hiring side, right? And I think there's
Yeah.
that's where things get really, really kind of how can I say, short sighted. I can tell you a small story from my experience. Like I understood, I coach program manager would never be a job I would search for. It does the title doesn't sound to me. It just sounds I don't know. It's just not sexy enough for me. I was or it wasn't. It was like I don't know, but when I was talking with somebody that was a program manager, and I was saying the kind of work I was like leaning more towards to, the kind of projects I was already doing, and my interest, they go, "Hey man, you you could be a great product program manager." Like, what's that? No, no way. Then I started to research about the job. Is like,
Yeah.
oh, actually, I would love to do that. That's an area of interest that I would love to do. But it had to come somebody to tell me, yeah, it doesn't have design in the title, so I was not looking for it. So this changes, right? Like the titles and the
Yeah.
skills. So yeah, that's a small anecdote.
Yeah, I mean, like now, like initially we used to have like hiring team or the recruiting team. Right now we have like a talent acquisition. Everything has changed, so we have to
Yeah.
be updated with the keywords that's coming on with the trend, even in the professional side, I think. So we should know the keywords that's trending right now for the job roles that we're
Yeah.
looking for. uh, okay, so you mentioned about the superpowers earlier, right? And how you can understand and discover the strength that you have. So how can we actually, like as a job seeker, how can they actually discover the superpower and strength? Like before using it, they have to know like if they have it or not. So how can they discover that? What can help them, understand their strengths?
Hmm. So two ways, I mean, there's several ways that I think like strength tests and all of that are always good to get a good, glimpse of what you have to, but I think there's also a more human approach. So this exercise that I do with a superhero, it's interesting because it makes people think about what makes me special. What's my superpowers? Where did it come from? Where did I acquire that? And the fact that they put themselves in the third person and drawing it, it makes wonders because you access parts of your brain that totally different than I ask like, what's your strength? You know? So that's one. The second part is like again is the retrospective of your career, right? Through all of those experiences there will be red threads, there will be things that you do that you are not aware of. So for example, I was working with somebody that was a salesperson, never
Mhm.
managed teams. They had a great experience, and And I kind of came to the realization that they wouldn't mind to be people managers, but they would not even apply to these jobs. So we were applying to sales jobs. But when we did these career retrospective, this career timeline exercise, we realized you have been managing teams for the last three jobs without knowing it. Really? Yes. In every job, you said, "Oh, well, I had to manage this team and these people because I was the oldest or the more experienced, and I created process." But he never saw himself as a people
Yeah.
manager. And then he's like, by putting that, like, look at what you wrote. You have been managing, effectively managing people unofficially for the last three jobs. So that switched them to say, well, then I can apply to people managers jobs too. Yes, you can. So is
Yeah.
this reflection, this retrospective, this analysis that also surfaces a lot of the things that we take for granted, for example, or that we are not even paying attention to. And those are actually, often the superpowers because it's so natural to us that we don't even like we brush them off.
Yeah. It's just in us. It's like inbuilt, like how the
Yeah.
batteries are inbuilt in cell phones now. It's
Well, hopefully it will last a bit longer.
true. We can't even change it, right? Change the whole cell phone.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean that's interesting. So do you think, they can sometimes, like, once in 2 months or once in a month, they can have this time out for themselves, understanding what are they doing, professionally, because that can help them, or they can see like a, let's say, quarterly growth in themselves, like, yeah, this is what I was doing like 3 months back, now this is what I'm doing. So if they find out any common things that's happening, so probably they can have that added as their, additional responsibility, or like you said, superpower, without being mentioned in their job description, like, given to them earlier. But then they find out that, yeah, I'm still doing this in my day-to-day life, and I go, taking the time out to, like, see, like, retrospect and like see what they are doing. Would that be helpful,
Yeah, I think that
like
would
in
be helpful for
long run?
I think that would be helpful for a myriad of reasons, right? Because first, you are continuously adding this library because this library never changes; it just changes to the future, right?
Yeah.
Not to the past. So the more you build it, you always have at hand, oh, my library of experiences. So the more you add to them, the better. Like when people come to me and do it for the first time after working, I don't know, 8, 10 years, 12 years in, and they go, "Oh my god, I need to review this." Of course, that's a bit heavier, right? So if you keep
Yeah.
adding to it, is much better. And I think for another perspective, on your personal level, it creates more self-awareness, it creates more self-esteem, it creates more accountability, and for career growth, if you are inside of the organization, I mean, you are tracking your progress. That's how you get promotions. That's how you go and get, your you get your raise in your paycheck. That's you have
Yeah.
the tools to prove to your manager, to your company that, hey, I'm doing something all right.
That's interesting. Like, just not reviewing the company things, but also reviewing yourself once in a while
Yeah.
would be helpful.
Especially yourself, because I believe that the metrics that a lot of companies use is very much inwards to the company. I mean, sometimes companies are measuring success in ways that people should not be measuring success personally or professionally, because it's very inwards to the organization, not to the growth of the person. There is always some agenda behind of growing the person in this context. So we need our own personal metrics to understand if we are going actually in the right direction or not. And if that overlaps with the company, that's great, hopefully. But it also showcases if there is any kind of misalignment.
Yeah. I think then they can also find out if they're going in the right direction or the wrong direction. Right.
Exactly.
Right. So, my last question, but we've also discussed this earlier in the beginning of the session, right? So, like, if they change careers, like, let's say someone switching from sales to, let's say, marketing or customer success, something like that, right? So, how can they find out things that would be, relevant for them to use the previous experiences? Like, is there a way to actually, maybe the job role here says something else, but on the previous experience you have done something similar to it, but then it's not exactly what the new role asks for, but you have done, like,
Mm.
they talk about client experience, like, oh yeah, onboarding, but you've done that, right? You have had things that you deal with clients, but you, and in a different way. So how can they utilize those experience and use it in their new, opportunity? Because sometimes it
Yeah.
might not be the same, but then it's actually the same, but it's not the same. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. We are talking also a lot about transferable skills, right? And one of the things about
Yeah.
transferable skills is that the core of the skill is probably the same, but the way you
Mm-hmm.
use it and the way you talk about it is different. And sometimes
Right.
this is where this translation gets lost, right?
Mm-hmm.
So often helps to have an external view of somebody
Okay.
that can help you decode, well, you know what, into where you are going, where you are want to go, the kind of
Mm-hmm.
skill that you use in, I don't know, in your area, in this area is called X, and this is the
Mm-hmm.
value that you could bring. So I think an external perspective is always better, that understands both sides where people are coming from. So for example, I'm talking a lot about design today because those are examples that I have also recently in terms of people that I've been working with. But at a certain point, I was helping somebody trying to move from banking customer support for claims into design. And how is that relevant? I mean, you've been
Mm-hmm.
customer support, like having people yelling at you, but the amount of knowledge that you learn about customer needs, processes, dealing with stressful situations. I mean,
Yeah.
if you are in claiming in banks, you most likely you are a great crisis manager and you know how to keep your stuff together. So that's a skill, right? So it's trying
And
to
patience.
understand what, and patience, yes. Is trying to understand what is the value that that skill brings on the abstract level, and then how does it apply to you, to the new thing. It's the same example with a cook, for example, right?
Mm-hmm.
Processes, and but this is what is called in design. It's like you are process driven. There is steps. You create journeys for clients instead of journeys for your dish in the kitchen. You know, it's helping people making these transferable skills and putting a name on it helps to have an external perspective.
Nice. So I think everything lies between, like, reviewing yourself once in a while and understanding what you are doing, and if that aligns with the organization or not, right? Because sometimes, we end up just fitting in and not trying to see what may is suitable for us, but rather be suitable for something else. We try to be suitable for something else. So I think that's very interesting, and the relations you brought up today were actually exciting and unusual, like I mentioned before, but yeah, makes a lot of sense. So yeah, thank you so much, Ricardo, for sharing all of these insights with us. Definitely must have been very beneficial and will be beneficial for our job view, like the seekers or the viewers who are watching us right now, and when they get an interview call next time, so they would know, like, hey, I have to not just state facts but have a story to my experiences, right? And
Yeah.
that will probably help me connect more with the manager, hiring manager, or the recruiter, right? So yeah, thank you so much for being with us again today, but we do have some time constraints, because of which we have to bring this session to an end. But nevertheless, we'll connect again in the future with much more interesting topics, right? And yeah, before we wrap up, is there anything that you would like to add personally from your end to all of our viewers?
Thank you so much for having me. It was a beautiful conversation. I really appreciate it to be here. And regarding, yeah, I just want to share the career storytelling toolkit I have. It's for free. It's downloadable on my website, and there is a webinar for around 45 minutes where I go through all the tools where you can start already working on your career storytelling by yourself. So if you go to ricardobrito.me/gift, or in my LinkedIn profile, you can download that kit. And yeah, I wish you all the best in your job seeking. I hope that helps into telling better stories. And Tripti, thank again for having me here today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Likewise, thank you so much for joining us. And to all our viewers, if you're a job seeker, you can get a free ticket. Go to our website, check out the events coming up, be it physical or webinars. So you can just check out the website and see the nearest location that's for you and you're looking a job for. So yeah, until next time, I'll see you all again. Thank you so much, Ricardo. Thank you, everyone. Bye
Bye.
bye.